Welcome to Huddle Up with Matias Bueno. Today we have a super special guest who's out in Ontario right now, but an Englishman at heart and a Liverpool fan through and through. James Sharman. He is our man who used to appear on the Score Television on the Footy Show, as well as now one of many hosts of Footy Prime, the podcast. James, it's an honor to have you on. Welcome.
Hey, thank you very much. An honor to be on. So yeah, that should be a lot of fun.
You're watching some footy right now. The Premier League has been maybe, I wouldn't say topsy-turvy, but seeing how things have changed during the landscape of this season with Ronaldo going to United after almost having gone to City, and there was those rumors, and now United were in shambles for several weeks there. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is gone. They brought in a new manager, and Man U really haven't found their form. I know you're a Liverpool fan, so it definitely is something I'm sure that's quite a treat to see them not succeed or not pose a big threat to Liverpool, especially after that shellacking Liverpool gave them. But what has gone wrong with United, and is this season salvageable for them in terms of the EPL?
Yeah, I mean, they're tough questions. And is it salvageable? Well, can they finish top four? And I think that has to be the goal now. And that is absolutely salvageable. I don't think anything beyond that is. They're not going to catch Chelsea or City or Liverpool, but they have the talent on that team, in that squad, to be a pretty decent side. Now, the problem's going to be the new guy comes in, Ralph Rangnick, who is, quite storied. He's very respected, but the style of football that he coaches and believes in is very different to what they've played before. So he only has 6 months to turn this thing around, and that's a very short window, small window, I think, to change around to his philosophy, if that's what he's going to push. So it's going to be tough. What's gone wrong with this team? Listen, I mean, since Alex Ferguson left, it's been poor hire after poor hire, lack of patience as well. The ownership there is a mess, obviously. They haven't got too many cultured football people, I think, at the top. So they just go out and buy sporadically without a plan as such. So, I think there's numerous reasons. And you're right. I mean, I am enjoying it as a Liverpool fan, but the reality of the matter is a strong United means a strong Premier League. And you do want to see the Uniteds of the world being strong and run properly, because they are probably the biggest sports brand in the world.
That's a very great point. They are super popular across the entire globe. And especially, I remember growing up as a kid and watching them when they did their tours throughout Asia. There are just millions and millions and millions, almost it seems billions of people that were just going insane to watch them play. And to see Ronaldo go back, I'm sure Brendan Dunlop is definitely relishing the nostalgia of seeing Ronaldo play for Manchester United once again. But again, you're right. Them being strong forces the higher level of competitiveness amongst other Premier League teams. But in the same breath, Liverpool have found tremendous form that we haven't seen in quite some time in terms of being able to consistently finish in the top three, as well as Chelsea have had a resurgence and City have been great as well. As a Liverpool fan, I know, as well as someone who's worked in the media and had a lot of analytical viewpoints on teams in the Premier League, what are some of the best things that you've seen from Liverpool in recent years as to why they've been able to succeed and finally get the monkey off their back and win the Premier League after long last?
Well, I mean, the buck stops with Jurgen Klopp. They hired the right manager, and they procured him from Germany, which is this conveyor belt of great managers. We've seen that more and more now. Rangnick is, for example, German. Thomas Tuchel, German. There's great German managers, in the top flight of European football. They get Klopp, who his philosophy is very much something that Liverpool fans want to see: attack-oriented football. Swashbuckling attacks, let's go for it. Let's try and outscore the opponent. So that was number one. And then they spent a lot of money on a centre back and a goalkeeper in Virgil van Dijk and Alisson Becker. And there's your spine of the team. Going forward, they had, Jordan Henderson was already there. They find Mo Salah at a discount price, who's become, arguably the best striker in world football. So all these things happened at the right time, in the right places. They had a plan, right? And that's it, a plan. You can't try and, reinvent the wheel in half a season. You need to start looking 4 or 5 year plans. And when they got Klopp, that's what they did. And then they backed him. And that's number one. A lot of clubs will get the manager and then won't back him financially in the market. Well, they did that. Now they had to sell some good players. They sold Philippe Coutinho for over £100 million, which is crazy, which financed these deals. So it was smart business as well. But I think it's just going back to their roots and knowing what they were and what they should be doing on the field and off the field, right? That's a huge fan base in the northeast of England and globally that support this team. But you've got to treat them right or they will call you out. So I think they were very transparent, they were very authentic, very honest, and they backed it with the right manager. And that's what's happened. And at the same time, United's had this decline, which hasn't hurt either, let's be honest. As same with Arsenal, a decline at the same time. Sure, City's arisen. Chelsea decline, came back up, decline, came back up. But it's been good timing as well. But I tell you, the last few years, Matthias, you watch the Premier League, I'm not sure we've seen such depth, such great depth of talent at the top of the table that we've seen in recent years with City, with Liverpool, with these teams.
That's very correct, James, in saying that the depth that we have seen is crazy. I remember in years past, it would be maybe 1-2 teams could compete, and then 3 and 4 were just hoping to cling on for Champions League, or they would just put their efforts into trying to make it as far as they could in the Champions League, which is actually a weird, I don't know if it's a phenomenon or what have you, but I think that's actually one of the strangest things I've ever seen is teams that struggle in their domestic league, but in the Champions League, they just find an extra gear or they can turn it on. Like I know that Leicester, after having won the Prem, they found themselves starting to stutter. But then when they were in the Champions League and they finally made it, they had a good run. Or Liverpool won the Champions League with Rafa Benitez, but couldn't come close to winning the Champions League. Pardon me, the Premier League. They won the Champions League, but they couldn't win the Premier League. And Manchester United being able to win the Champions League in the Premier League, and then it all kind of fell apart. Chelsea being so-so in the Premier League, but then winning the Champions League in one of the most unlikely fashions with Didier Drogba in 2012. And I think for all Premier League fans, that has to go down as one of the most shocking victories you've ever seen from an EPL team winning the Champions League, at least in recent history, maybe before your time and my time. We'd mentioned before recording, Nottingham Forest had won back-to-back in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And other smaller English clubs had won. But during our current era, having seen Chelsea won in the way they did and seeing these teams that can't succeed in the Premier League win in the Champions League is just so baffling to me. Have you ever stopped to think about that before? Or
you
like,
know what? It's a really good point. It's a great point. And I mean, listen, cup football is different to league football, right? So over the course of 38 games, generally speaking, the best team's going to win most years because you can't hide in 38 games. Whereas in a cup tournament like the Champions League, or even a World Cup or European Championship, but you got to be up for each individual game and get up for that, which is what teams do. And certain managers are cup specialists. Rafa Benitez is a cup specialist manager, knows how to coach a team in those one-offs and gets teams up for those moments, those spectacles, as opposed to the long drawn-out process that a league is. And also luck helps a lot as well. You'd look at hockey. I mean, if you ride a hot goalie in the playoffs, you might win the Stanley Cup. You might be nowhere near as good as the next team. I'm a big Leaf fan, right? So when Montreal beat the Leafs in the last playoffs last year, they beat them because of Carey Price.
Yeah.
Right? They got a hot goalie. So you might get a little bit of luck in the Champions League, maybe to a certain point. That being said, it is the biggest trophy in world club football. And I know if you look at teams overseas, they'll put that as number one. I think a lot of English teams put that as number two. The league is more important. But like a Leicester, for example, man, they won the league, right? They out of nowhere, they won the league. They've got nothing to lose next year in the Champions League, so they went on a pretty good run. So I think it's that, it's just cup football versus league football, different mindsets entirely.
Well, I never really thought about it that way before because I guess my initial thinking was, well, the Champions League, you're going to play against harder opponents. So even if you're putting it all forth in one game, it's still going to be difficult. For example, we've seen teams, if you look back to the beginning of the history of the European Cup, there are some teams who we may never see win for a very long time. For example, I know in Portugal, Porto won with José Mourinho as the coach in 2004. And that's the closest that a Portuguese team has come to winning ever since. And for Benfica, who won in the 60s when they had Eusébio, they may never come that close to winning for quite a long time. They may be the best of the 3 Portuguese major teams in a Champions League tournament, but to see them win it all would be pretty remarkable considering how strong the Real Madrid's, Barcelona.
You're right. It's definitely more spread out, but you mentioned Porto as a great example. That Porto team was fantastic, right? You look at individually those players, and they all left the next year, right? Or the year after the next, You know, Carvalho went to Chelsea, of course. You know, Ferreira went to, these are great players who happen to be in this perfect storm at this club. We're seeing it now, and a couple of years ago with Ajax, right? You've seen this kind of perfect storm of these young guys hitting their prime at just the right time. They won't ever retain those players. They won't be able to. And now and again you get it. But you're right, it's so rare to see them actually win the whole thing. I mean, I would tell you what, since Porto, would they be the last team to surprise and win the Champions League? I'm trying to think. I mean,
Inter Milan beating Bayern would have been a surprise for sure because I think
not the same surprise though, right? You had Mourinho coaching them, right? He was coaching.
Yeah, they were good, but like it wasn't like, oh my goodness, there's no way this team ever could have won. But it was definitely an upset when they beat Bayern for sure.
Yeah, an upset, yeah, for sure. But Porto was like, before that year started, if you told me that Porto were going to win the Champions League in 2004, wasn't it? I think it's 4. I would have said, no chance. What are you talking about? That was a freak result and good for them. It's amazing for the sport, right? Whereas Inter Milan still Inter Milan. They should be competing. They don't always, but they should be competing every year, right? I mean, when they won the Scudetto last year. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think sadly in that regard, fairy tale runs domestically and in Champions League years are very few and far between nowadays, and international tournaments, very few and far between. But when they do happen, man, it's glorious.
I think Bucharest or Red Star Belgrade would have won a chance. I think they've won one of those teams won in the late 80s, which I'm not sure if I haven't studied the history of it a lot, but if they were a roster that was just star-studded or if they had a miracle run. But most of the time, consistently, the same teams are getting to the final 4 or final 8 in Champions League. And to see those teams win as one-offs is, I mean, Inter, definitely an upset, not a huge surprise because they are a great club in Serie A. But yeah, it's very, very rare to see those teams stun all of Europe and win it all. I mean, in the World Cup, I remember watching a video on YouTube that talked about what it takes to win the World Cup and why certain teams in certain eras won. For example, Hungary being good in the 50s was because of the fact that they were a bigger nation, had more pull economically, and the world was a lot, I guess, bigger, as you could say, because teams weren't traveling to play each other a lot and they had a lot of concentrated talent. Whereas now, I mean, Hungary hasn't made the World Cup since 1986. So it's a very different era. Whereas now, like the teams that are always going to make it have the most money, the most best coaching. Right? Like Iceland making it is because they put everything they could into coaching and running as like lucky flyers, but they wouldn't be able to win the World Cup. Or even like Canada. I mean, that's going to be a big topic of discussion. I know it has been with you guys on your podcast. Canada have a very serious chance of making the World Cup legitimately for the first time and since 1986 and second time ever.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think Canada's realistic outlook is for being able to build on the success that they've had during the qualifiers? Because in 2001, they did win the Gold Cup, or I think it was 2000, one of those 2 years.
Yeah.
They did have a lot of success during that era. And having spoken with a few guys who were on that team, they said, well, we thought that this would be the time that it would all come together. Mm-hmm. And when America made the World Cup in 94 and had their run, that was the time when it started to become put all together and America started to build a more consistent team, whereas Canada fell off and then it just kind of became a dud. So can Canada seriously build off of this? What are the factors that are going to go into that?
I think so, 100%. Yeah, I think the world's very different now, footballing wise, than it was in 2000, when nothing changed. Right, there's no professional team league in Canada. Then these not high end. There was no MLS in Canada in 2000. The CSA was still extremely amateur, right? And I think it's come a long way since then. It's not perfect now, but it's come a long way. I think you look at the team now and the players who are entering their prime. These are stars. That Canadian team in 2000, Craig Forrest, what was a Premier League player. He's a star within Canada's context. There wasn't really anyone else who was stars. I mean, Paul Stoll-Terry was an excellent player, never respected enough, in my opinion. But now you have Atiba, who's close to being a global superstar, right? Let's be honest. He's very close. You got Tajon Buchanan, who's going to be a star, right? I mean, Club Bruges don't know what they're getting, the fans, because, man, he's going to be a lot of fun, right? Atiba's Atiba, the most underrated Canadian athlete of all time. Stefan Eustáquio is going to be, I think, the real deal. They've got throughout the lineup depth, and these kids are going to grow with that program and going to get moves to big clubs. I mean, John David will be leaving Lille pretty soon, I think, for a very big club. Maybe Carl Aaron leaves Besiktas. There's rumors out there. These guys are still young, in their infancy, really, of their careers. And I think that as a whole, Canada, if they qualify, and listen, I think they should qualify, they will likely qualify, but it's not done yet. But the next World Cup after Qatar, they're hosting, they're going to be qualifying for that. And from that point onwards, there are 48 team World Cups, right? So probably 8 CONCACAF teams or 6 CONCACAF teams will qualify, whatever it is. Canada's definitely top 6, right? In the worst case scenario. So you're going to be seeing Canada at World Cups for a very long time. And when you get that consistency and when you get that notoriety and you're in the mainstream media and the mainstream Canada wakes up, you're going to see more and more money poured into this program and see more and more, players and kids develop. And kids now that are, basically discovering football for the first time, watching Alphonso Davies in a Canadian shirt, they're going to be inspired by this guy. And they're going to, play football because of him. And I don't think we've ever had that before. We've had some really good players. Julian de Guzman was a really good player in a different era, probably 5-6 years a little bit too soon, unfortunately, for Canada, because he looked good in that midfield right now, I tell you. So yeah, I think we're on this precipice of this tipping point, but still got to get there. Got to get to that World Cup.
Do you think soccer could ever surpass? I mean, hockey would be enormous, but do you think soccer could ever become, at the very least, the second most popular sport in Canada?
I do. I look at immigration in this country, right? I'm an immigrant. I get it. Only makes sense that it's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. More kids are going to be playing this game. And as I said, I'm a hockey fan, right? But it's such a niche sport, even in Canada. I know it's a part of the fabric of sport and the culture in this country, but it's still quite niche. You need a bit of money to play it, whereas football, you don't. And I think you see more and more teams and clubs professionalize. I really believe that 20 years from now, football, soccer, if not number one, is going to be considered a mainstream sport. And not just from a playing standpoint, because it already is a playing mainstream sport, but from a sport that's followed. Absolutely. MLS have huge ambitions, right? A lot of, big ambitions to grow and become one of the most, the biggest leagues in world football. And they can get there. Again, they're not there yet, but they can get there as well. So I think without doubt, we're in this upward trajectory right now to becoming considered a top sport in this country. And it might not take 5 years, it might be 10 years. I got time. You got time? We'll be there.
Yeah, I got time. Well, I'll be there. As someone that comes from the UK, what is your experience been like with hockey? Because I always find that so fascinating, since in European countries where it snows more consistently, and in Scandinavia, Northern Europe, people like hockey, but the UK is not really a country where people are obsessed with hockey. And if there are, it's because they have family from the United States or Canada. What was your first experience like with hockey when you came to Canada? And how do you view hockey as a sport overall from someone who comes from the UK, where soccer or football and rugby and cricket are far more popular than ice hockey may ever be in the UK?
Yeah, you know what? I actually used to watch hockey when I lived in England. There was a professional league. It's not a great league. They're usually Canadian guys who couldn't make it in even the AHL, right? So you get a few names here and there. During the lockout, I think Theo Fleury played there for a bit, actually, believe it or not. But yeah, so I watched a little bit growing up, but it's still very much, on the periphery. I came to Canada in 1990, and around 91, 92, when the Leafs made the Doug Gilmour trade, is when I really got into it. I had a new group of friends who are big hockey fans. And then that playoff run, 92, 93, I just was just blown away. I was also my first time really going to bars and clubs with my mates, right? So I'm young, I'm enjoying life, I'm watching hockey, I'm drinking beer with my mates. It was just a great time. And it began this love affair of the sport and myself. And it also has allowed me, because obviously I follow international sports for my work and my job, it allowed me to be just a fan, a one-eyed, blinkered, unrealistic fan, a good escape. And that's why I love it so much. And, the sport itself, listen, English people, we're violent by nature, I think. And I'm not a violent person, but in the sporting stratosphere, I like a good physical contest. And that's why I thought this is my kind of sport. Had I come here a bit earlier and learned to skate properly, I would have played hockey. There's no doubt about it. But I didn't. It's one of my regrets. Maybe it's not too late. Maybe I should get the old skates on this winter and start playing in some old timers league. But I better start learning how to skate first, I guess. But no, it's just a great sport. Fast, furious, violent, high skill. What else do you want?
For someone that comes from a part of the European continent where physicality is definitely rewarded and enjoyed in sports, it does make sense how that connection to hockey would start to grow within you, especially when you come to Canada. You mentioned watching the Leafs during a time when maybe people would look back and regret it now, who are from your generation, and would look back and see all the suffering and heartache that the Leafs have unfortunately experienced. Basically, since I was born, like they last won a whatever 7-game playoff series in 2004 or something, or they've won one since then. But yeah, I remember making TikToks and doing research on the 93 Maple Leafs being one of the teams that should have won the Stanley Cup, and the Doug Gilmour incident where Gretzky high stick, no
Yeah,
call,
very
and then
crazy.
scores in overtime. And I was in Toronto earlier this year for a few months, and every single person I spoke to who was within your age range, every single one were like, yeah, should have won 93. Should have won
Yeah.
the Stanley Cup in 93, no question.
Defining moment, right? It's a defining moment. And it's kind of sad that we celebrate a semi-final loss. It wasn't even a final, right? Which is why I think, this past summer with England getting to the final of Euro, and the year before, or 2 years before, the final of the World Cup, it was like, I've almost seen the light. I've almost seen this moment where my team wins the big prize, right? Liverpool won the league, but I saw that in the 80s, right? So it was great, don't get me wrong. But as far as England's concerned and the Leafs, if ever they actually won the damn thing, I don't know how to react. I don't know if I could handle it, to be honest with you.
I was going to say, as someone who's an Englishman, like, you're used to this kind of thing. Cheering for a semifinal loss is something.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Great. Yeah. Hey, we're fourth best. Amazing.
I mean, as someone who's Portuguese or half Portuguese myself, I mean, half Brazilian definitely gets a little more of the trophies, but half Portuguese, like Brendan, we like to share that the relishing in making the semifinals, but winning it all, of course, is a moment that brings you to tears, and it's something you never could have foreseen in your entire life. And I was thinking this summer, I was like, well, two of the most insufferable fan bases in Canada for soccer are going to go crazy. And it's either going to be England, who have literally never seen themselves win a trophy since 66, or Italy, who saw themselves win the World Cup in 2006 and in 82, but haven't seen them win the Euro since 1968. So again, super long time for both teams to win the Euro, the same tournament, and England's just a tournament in general. I could only imagine just how possessed like fans would feel. Like it's England is like the Toronto Maple Leafs of international football.
Well, no,
like they're always the running
absolutely.
joke. Everyone always brings up the same year, 1966/1967 for Leafs fans.
100%. They're the same
all the time.
Same situation. Absolutely right. And huge fan base. Lots of money in the program itself. Have everything they could possibly want, but they can't get that trophy. Maybe Matthias, maybe not winning, but almost winning is better than winning, because at least then you still have hope. Right, and this promise of better things. Whereas if you win it all, now what? I've hit the peak. Where else to go? I'm standing on the top of Everest. There's nowhere else I can go that's higher in this world. Although K2 is apparently higher, but you get my point. Like now what? Kind of boring, isn't it? Maybe semifinals and final losses. Let's go with them.
And I was going to say another thing too that is very similar is the fact that England have had some of the best individual players that the world has seen. Super, super talented individuals. The Leafs providing the same level of very talented individuals. But when it comes together, it's just something isn't right. I know that Belgium was like this for a long time. Now they've finally started to dominate. But for a long time, I was like, Belgium were frauds in a way for a long time, because they would always be ranked so high, and then like they didn't make the World Cup in 2006, or they didn't really go very far.
Maybe Belgium is going through what England went through, though. I mean, it's their golden generation, right? They haven't won anything yet. They haven't done anything yet. No. Belgium, and some would say they're actually in the first stage of decline right now, right? So maybe we'll look back on this Belgium side and say, man, what should have been? They didn't manage it somehow. It's interesting, isn't it? Because the collective is so much more important than the individuals. And we see that more and more now. And the truly great teams, they have the individuals, but they got that cohesiveness that you can just see all over the pitch or all over the ice. And I don't know what that magic ingredient is. I guess if we knew what it was, you could bottle it, you could become very rich. But something happens with great teams. And I'm not talking about just teams that might luck out and win a Champions League. I'm talking about teams that do it over and over again. United of the 2000s, those Arsenal teams, the AC Milan teams of the late 80s, these kind of teams, they do it over and over again. How do they do it? What is that missing ingredient?
There's something that, from what we were just talking about, speaking of Belgium and teams that get so close or what should have been, who do you think has the best chance of teams that have never won the World Cup to win in Qatar next year?
Ooh, who have never won the World Cup? Wow. Um, that's a really good question. I mean, I, I'd say Portugal, but I mean they're not even in the World Cup just yet. They've got to get through a couple of pretty tough games, including maybe against Italy, obviously. Um, the Dutch aren't what they used to be. That's obvious. I don't know the answer. That's a really maybe it is Belgium. I think it probably is Belgium. To be honest with you, I mean they still have the talent to do it. There's no doubt. Um, yeah, I'd say it's probably still Belgium. I still believe in this golden generation. If they're all healthy enough, there's still some very good young players coming through and replacing the Eden Hazards who perhaps aren't quite what they once were. So I would say probably Belgium.
Who will be the next team that you think will start to become dark horse runners for the World Cup? Because we've seen some talent start to emerge out of the US with Pulisic and Norway, and Belgium maybe being in the first stage of decline. But who do you think is the next generation's version of Belgium, what we have now, like the Belgiums and Portugals who are close but not yet there yet?
Not quite there. I tell you what, you mentioned the US, and that's a good point, and they're not there yet. But just given the amount of money in that program, the amount of kids playing football in the States, and how they're taking the steps forward, they're going to be a contender in the next 20 years at some point, I would say. And it could be this group. This group right now, it's a bit like Canada, right? In that they're very young. There's been a transition from the old guard to this current new guard. There's been some ups and downs, but they got a good coach there. And I think the States, if all goes right, and if they still progress the way we think they're progressing, I mean, we've got 7, 8 players playing in top leagues around around Europe right now, which is the first time that's happened. I think the States could very much be a dark horse in the next, if not this World Cup, probably, but maybe in the home World Cup, maybe in the 4 years after that. Very much so. A fun team to watch, exciting talent, that's for sure.
So, James, we are getting towards the end of our time. So, I want to ask you a few rapid questions to have a little more fun before we go.
All right.
What is your favorite childhood sports memory?
All right. Yeah, Steve Davis winning. No, sorry. Okay, favorite. Okay, that's my most painful. Favorite would be Liverpool winning was it 88 FA Cup? I think 88, I forget the year now. Jeez, that's how great it was for me. But it would be that, I would think, because I remember watching in my friend's house, Alex Green, his parents are huge Reds, and all my friends came around sitting on the couch and watching Ian Rush and Bruce Grobbler doing their things. And they were my team. They were my comic book heroes. And it's my first time really sitting down in an environment with other fans and watching it. And it was just electric. It was amazing.
Who is your favorite footballer growing up from the time that you were born up until you were about 18 years old?
That'd be Bruce Grobbler. That was a goalkeeper for Liverpool. Crazy legs, flamboyant, brilliant keeper. And I got to meet him and interview him a few times and got to know him a little bit. And, they say don't meet your heroes, but Brucey was great, really good guy. And yeah, I was a goalkeeper back in those days. And I still get chills when I see the highlights of Bruce doing his thing in the 1980s.
Who is the best team to have ever won the World Cup? Like which individual World Cup winner from what year?
It's got to be Brazil 70, I would say. It has to be. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's before my time. Well, hope is obvious. But
it is very obvious doing that way.
They were incredible and obviously led by Pele, but just what a team they were.
Who is the greatest team to have not won the World Cup?
Which
year and which team?
You know what? Geez, you know what? Well, it's got to be England, right? 86. Gaza was 90. Yeah, Lineker was that 86 team was very, very good. Came so close, lost out to Maradona's handball, of course. But that was a really solid England team that I was a kid, but I thought we were going to go all the way to win it.
I thought you were going to maybe say 1990, but maybe there's some.
It wasn't a great World Cup, right? I mean, that's my most defining sporting memory is 1990 Gascoigne's tears, because I just moved to Canada at the time, halfway through the World Cup. And I was obviously, it's an emotional time for any kid. I was 16 years old, and seeing guys on the field crying, and then I'm here in Canada crying. I'm just brokenhearted. So much going on in my life at that time, and it was amazing, but defining.
What's your favorite sport to watch besides football and hockey?
Snooker.
Really? I mean, for
Oh,
a British
really?
person, like it doesn't come as
Oh,
much of a surprise. But
I love
I've
snooker.
never had a person say that to me.
I bet you haven't. You know, 1980s, I loved watching snooker, and now it's on DAZN snooker. And I asked my wife and my daughter, they just cannot believe what I'm watching. They just roll their eyes. And what are you watching this for? I can watch it for hours upon hours. I find it so relaxing.
What is your favorite British television show?
But oh, that's a good one. It's still got to be The Office, the good one, the original one with David Brent, Ricky Gervais. I can watch it to this day, and I'll get the same laughter now as I would have done, 15 years ago.
What's the most overrated British television show that has become popularized outside of the country? I think I know the answer to this one, but I want to see what you say.
It's got to be Coronation Street.
Really? Oh, okay. Yeah. I
mean, it's addictive. It's addictive. Trust me. I don't watch it anymore, but I used to watch a lot of it. But it's terrible. The acting's bad. The storylines are ridiculous. It's been going on for 60 odd years now, every single day. What is wrong with people?
If you had the power to knight one person from your country who you looked up to, whether it be as a kid or now, or who you think is in honorable standing, who would it be and why?
7-time world snooker champion Steve Davis. Steve Interesting Davis. And I'm serious. Man, that'd be a rush meeting him. It'd be incredible. That's probably, I bet that's the first time someone said that to you as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I've only seen even just like a snooker table in real life once. And I was like, man, like how could people be good at this? Like, this seems literally impossible. Like regular pool is just difficult, but that is just a whole nother level.
I could have said, Stephen Hawkins, Winston Churchill, these really important figures in history. No, Steve Davis.
And my final question for you is this. If you had the opportunity to interview one person who you have not mentioned on this podcast and you have never had the chance to interview in real life, any person, it can be from pop culture, movies, TV, sports, whoever, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
You know what? I think it might be Ricky Gervais. Again, I could go for some really important figures in history. I know that. But I just think me and him would get on like a house on fire. He's hilarious. Have a couple of pints and just have a good chit chat. That would be incredible.
I do appreciate the humor of enjoying the UK Office because, I mean, or the Office UK version is one that people talk to. Most people in North America, especially ones that aren't British, are like, oh no, man, like it's whatever. It seems kind of boring. But sometimes I feel like I have that quirky side of my humor where I'm like, well, have you really explored it? Have you really given it a watch? Because of course, the US version of The Office is funny and is very popular for a reason. But sometimes you got to appreciate where things came from, or even like for someone like myself, I love the movie Office Space because I know that played a part in inspiring The Office UK, which then inspired the US version of The Office. So that kind of funny, mundane,
it's that
cynical humor is amazing.
Yeah, it's the awkwardness, the silences and the timing is just perfect. Those moments we all go through in life where it's like you're cringing, like I don't know what this. They nail it so well. It's just perfect, sterile work environments, and just I thought, yeah, it's inappropriate at the same time, but it's just brilliant.
It is brilliant indeed. And James, with that, I want to thank you for having been on today's episode. It was an immense pleasure to chat with you about footy, other sports, and as well being able to chat about your heritage, how pop culture influences tie into life for people here in North America, and getting to know a little bit more about some of the oddities around sports like snooker and the legends that are the Steve Davises of the world. So James, thank you so much for having been on. It was amazing.
Matthias, thanks so much, mate. I appreciate that. Enjoyed it.
And thank you to the listener for enjoying today's episode with one of the hosts of Footy Prime, the podcast, James Sharman.